Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing with you books that can help you get out of a reading slump. So we all have experienced the dreaded reading slump where we just have no desire to read, and I think for me reading is just something that gives me joy, and if at the time I'd rather be doing other things, that's okay. And sometimes you get in this little slumpy kind of reading mood, but there are definitely books that can help spark your investment and joy of reading. So these are my 5 books that will help you get out of a reading slump. So one approach that I like to do for reading slumps is either find a series that has a few books out for that instant gratification of checking off a series and being caught up, or there's ones that are kind of a little bit longer that kind of keep you invested for a while. You get immersed in this in the world and the characters, and you just want to kind of totally lose yourself in that. And so there's kind of 2 ways that you can go about doing it. For the long, the long game in terms of a series that is long, I would recommend the Inspector Gamache series by Louise. This is hands down my favorite series of all time, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, during main quarantine, when we were back in the days when we weren't allowed to kind of leave our house, I marathoned this entire series. At that point in time already, I think I read the first 3 books, and then I literally just marathoned everything. So I spent a lot of time in Three Pines. So basically the premise of this series is that it follows Inspector Gamache, who is the head homicide detective in Montreal, and a lot of his murders that he's investigating involve this small quaint town called Three Pines, which kind of gives off Stars Hollow vibes. I have an entire video dedicated to why I really love this series, but it's just, like I said, these characters are just so well developed, and you can't help, they feel like a family. When I read this, it feels, even though it's dealing with murder, I feel like it's just a warm cup of tea. I just have that cozy feeling, and there's something really unique and special, and especially during the COVID-19 quarantine, I wasn't able to go back home and visit my family in Canada for almost 2 years, so it was very nice to kind of, this reminded me of home, because these characters feel like my family, and just the themes of found family just make me feel warm and cozy. And because this is such a long series, you can just honestly marathon them. I think there's 18 or 19 books out now, so you can dedicate yourself to this series and just lose yourself in it, because there are many, in addition to each book having its overarching, its own murder mystery, there is an overarching narrative that takes 8 or 9 books to progress, so you're also following kind of that overarching narrative as well. So it keeps you invested, and I just love this series. So if the thought of starting a 18+ book series is a little daunting, then there is another series that I recommend that is fast-paced, has only I think 3 books out, 4 to be in the new year, so it's very easy to get caught up, and it is the Kate Marshall series by Bryndza, the first book being 9 Elms. And this series follows Kate Marshall, who formerly was a police officer, and what should have been the highlight of her career, catching the 9 Elm serial killer, ended up being her downfall, when even though she was the one who figured out who the 9 Elm killer was, serial killer, the media tore her apart when they found out that she used to have a relationship with this person. And so we follow Kate, who is teaching criminology at a university 15 years later, and even though this has been over a decade ago, these events have been over a decade ago, she's still very much struggling with picking up the pieces of herself after the fallout of this case. And so when there are a string of murders taking place that have a lot of similar kind of MOs to the 9 Elms killing, she somehow inadvertently gets involved with the investigation, and it kind of goes off from there. Like I said, these books are incredibly fast-paced. The chapters are fairly short. As you can see, they're only a couple pages, so it makes it for a quick read, and I feel like each chapter ends on a cliffhanger, so you're just wanting to find out more and more. And what I really like too is Kate is such a compelling three-dimensional complex character. She's very much flawed. She's still dealing with a lot of demons and a lot of issues from, you know, the fallout of all these events, and so you see her struggle. You can't help but root for her, and you just follow her through the ups and downs of life, which I really enjoy. She's such an interesting protagonist. And yeah, so if you're looking for like a fun series to kind of start that's a little bit, that has a few books out, then I recommend this series. And sometimes just the thought of a full narrative can be a little bit too, you know, too intimidating, especially if you're in too deep with your reading slump. And so sometimes it's just easier to read a book that is just basically a manuscript, and it is Daisy Jones and the Six is what came to mind. I listened to this via audiobook, and also obviously you can read this as an audiobook too. I recommend the audiobook. It was really good. I got it from the library, and this is basically kind of a documentary of the rise and fall of the famous 70s band Daisy Jones and the Six. And what is unique, you guys probably already know, is that this book is basically like commentary. So if you're watching a documentary and you're getting that like commentary from the people that were involved, it's literally just told through like a manuscript, like basically like this. And yeah, that's why I said if I recommend the audiobook for this, and I listened to it when I was driving out to Chesapeake Bay for a conference, and I was just so invested. I was like, oh my goodness, like these characters, even though you basically just get their commentary and their perspective on things, they felt so real to me, and I just was like so immersed in this world. Like even though I finished it, I was thinking about it weeks after, because that's how obsessed I was with this story. And I think it's going to be an Amazon Prime TV show, which is exciting too, so if you want to get invested in that. But yeah, I highly recommend this. It's a very different type of reading experience, and like I said, recommend the audiobook for this one. So this is a book that creeped me out to no end, and I was just totally lost in this world, and it is Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. I read this, I want to say, a long time ago during my undergrad, so it's been at least, I want to say, like, you know, close to 8 or 9 years now, and that's when I was in my big Gillian Flynn kick. And so this one is my favorite of her books, and I feel like it's not as popular as some of the other ones, but it follows Libby, who is one of the lone survivors of a massacre that knocked out her entire family. And so she and her brother were the only ones that survived, and so she, as a child, testified that it was her brother that killed her entire family. And so, you know, years have passed, and she hasn't really thought much about these events. Like, she's tried, you know, she's moved on with her life, but when this man approaches her and tells her that he doesn't think her brother was the one that killed her family, she very much questions everything. So while this is going on, we get flashbacks to the events leading up to the massacre, and it was just, I was so invested in this. This one is definitely very dark and dark and spooky, but I was just gripped from the first page. And then because too, like, the narrator is like questioning herself, you also question what you're experiencing as well. So you're trying to piece together like what could happen. Like, is her brother innocent? Like, what is going on? And yeah, this was just super fun. I haven't read anything like this in terms of like that made me really question what I was reading and trying to piece together everything that happened. And yeah, this one was just, it's fairly short too, so which makes it a little bit easier, so it's not as daunting. But if you like dark, you know, that deals with occult stuff, then I think you would like this. But you just kind of like the build up where you get like the flashback days of either Libby or her brother's Ben's perspective of like the date and like the time kind of eventually leading up, and you're piecing together this timeline. Just keeps you very engaged with this story, which makes for a really fun, you know, reading experience. And lastly, I have one of my most favorite historical fiction novels, and it's part of a series that you don't necessarily have to read in order, but it kind of follows a family through the different generations, which could be fun. And I have here Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. This is a book that I just really love. So what is interesting about this book is that we follow 3 different narratives that are somehow become interconnected. We follow Caroline Faraday, who is this rich socialite living in New York. We follow a girl who's growing up in Poland, and also we follow this woman who eventually becomes part of the concentration camps during World War II, and she becomes a guard, or becomes a doctor that does the tests on a lot of women. So it kind of, these, obviously the stories, you can kind of tell how the Polish woman who ends up getting sent to the concentration camp and the concentration camp doctor, their storylines are connected, but you don't understand how Caroline gets somehow connected into this, which I really enjoy. But even though we're jumping around from different the 3 different perspectives, the storyline keeps going. Like, I don't feel like everyone's like put on hold while we're, you know, reading from another person's perspective, which makes for a lot of fun. And there's something about Martha Hall Kelly's writing in particular. I read this like initially when it came out, and I kind of forgot about it, and then I read it again with my aunt, and I forgot how much I loved this novel and these characters. And part of it has to do with the writing style in here. I remember reading this the second time around, and I'd look up and be like, oh my goodness, I already read 50 pages. Like, I was so immersed in these characters and their different experiences, and obviously like interconnectedness of their narratives, that I just like totally lost myself in this novel. And like I said too, it's technically part of a series, but they're not, you know, you can read them in any order and or whatever era that you're most interested in. So in this one we follow Caroline during World War II, and then Lost Roses, which is, in terms of publication date, came out after this one, follows Caroline's mother Eliza during World War I. And then Sunflower Sisters, which was the most recent book in this trilogy, the final one in here, we follow their great aunts during the Civil War. So you can follow like different eras, and I like they're loosely based off of real experiences too of women in history. So I really like how it's kind of the different generation of women's experiences during these major worldwide events, and obviously each one has 3 stories that eventually become intertwined throughout, you know, the pages of the books. But if you're looking for, like, if you like historical fictions and want to try something, you know, completely immersive, then I recommend checking this series out, or this author out in general. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what are your go-to kind of either books or genres that help you get out of a reading slump. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.